Pela is actually a really underrated unit right now. She has many good things. She's a support that buffs in terms of ice type damage later on with her Eidolons, as well as good defense, shred, and strong AoE damage. Let's take a look at the kit and see what makes her look so strong, and I'll also be teaching you how to build this amazing support unit. There are 3 things that makes Pela really strong in combat, and the first of course is her skill ability. When I drop this skill, it actually has this ice reduction that appears, allowing me to remove buffs from the enemy unit and also increasing the damage that ice characters deal to this target as well. Not only that, the second reason why she's extremely strong is also, if you look here, when we started off the battle, she had very little energy, but even just with one skill and now with a normal attack, she's almost at max energy, and this is because her energy restoration is very high. For example, when she attacks debuff targets or eliminate units, but also her ultimate energy cost is very low. If we go in and click here and see, she actually has a 110 energy cost in terms of her ultimate. In comparison, a character like Natasha will have 90, and you can see the speed of recovery for her energy is very quick, considering that it's a 110 amount of energy cost as well.
Enemy data secure. So
ultimate is really strong because it not only does an AoE defense break, but it also does good enough damage, especially when you're building her in terms of like a DPS, a sub DPS kind of role.
Time for a shot. Enemy targets detected.
Okay, and now let's talk about how I built this amazing unit as well. In terms of optimal Lightcones, there are 2 ways that Pela is generally played off, depending on her Eidolon level, as she scales very well in all the way up from E0 to E6. So the first way is actually building her for a support in the earlier Eidolon levels, and I will definitely be going more in terms of resolution shines as pearls of sweat. And the reason for that is, if you think about her ultimate ability, which hits in an AoE and aims to debuff enemies, this passive ability works really well with Pela because it also gives you this ensnare, which drops enemies' defense by 12% for 1 turn. And this is at the first superimposition level, so it goes all the way up to 24% later on, which is quite significant as well, combined with her ultimate ability. So I think this is really strong, but for those of us who don't have this light cone, you could always go for another one, for example, Void over here. Although it's a 3-star light cone, so you use the 3-star stats, but if you're building her more as a support, you want her to be able to land her debuffs very well. And the other build that I want to talk about is once you get to the later Eidolons, she becomes more of a damage dealer in her overall kit, and that is when I actually would consider a light cone, for example Good Night and Sleep Well. And the reason for that is this is also a very generic light cone which could be transferred over to other characters later on, for example when you're switching out her role in the team as well. When she has a debuff, the target has the damage deal is increased by 15%, stacking up to 3 times, which means there is a 45% damage increase, and this effect is also applies to damage over time. So she works really well in teams. For example, if you have Dunheng who slows, or even DOT proccing characters like maybe Asta's auto attack, or perhaps even Sampo or in Kafka later on as well. Very strong overall in my opinion, and I think it's worth investing into as well. You could of course still stick with resolution shines as pearls of sweat, as it is a 4-star light cone, so it does give you that 4-star stats as well, to give you more of like a hybrid in terms of like additional defense breaking, but also a bit of damage potential from 4-star stats. So I think it's really a choice depending on what you're looking for. And now let's talk about the optimal relics for her. I think there are 3 main relics from the 4-piece slot that we can go for. The first of course that everyone will be looking at is the Hunter of Glacial Forest. The downside of this set, even though it gives ice damage already, is that it's very difficult to utilize the 4-piece set bonus, because ultimate, when they use their ultimate and get crit damage, you will know that crit damage early on is actually quite hard to get, especially when your crit rate is very low, so you won't really be dishing out any crit to begin with. This set is of course ideal going into endgame. However, for early game players, this is something to note. Just don't follow a 4-piece set because you want to complete the set as well. And the second set that I think is going to be really good for Pela will be a Thief of Shooting Meteor. It gives a total of 32% break effect, and I will definitely be looking for the full 4-piece as well because it's very efficient. And also when you inflict a witness break on an enemy, she regenerates 3 energy. Very strong for her already low energy cost build in totality, especially if you factor in that 110 energy as well as the numerous amounts of energy restoration she has in her Tracers as well as Eidolons. So those are 2 sets, and the third set of course will be a very generalist set like Musketeer of Wildweed. It gives you attack that she needs, it gives you speed which allows her to do more damage, act quicker, and also have more energy restoration. At the same time, it gives a very nice basic attack damage increases. She does tend to use her basic attack from time to time, especially if the target has already been inflicted by rest down, in terms of ice rest down in the skill, or maybe you don't particularly need to remove a buff from the enemy target. Okay, and in terms of the simulated universe, there are a couple of them that I'm looking at. The first one definitely will be this one right here, in terms of the Pan-Galactic Commercial Enterprise. It increases the effect hit rate by 10% and increases it further based on the amount of effect hit rate it has. Currently, a lot of the monsters in the enemy don't have very high resistances, but I do feel that as we go on, the monsters will have much higher effect hit rate resistance as well. And this means that for debuffers in general, especially Pela, who relies a lot on debuffs, you want to get their hit rate up a little bit more so that you can be able to cope with these enemies as well. Of course, later on in the game, when we have more access to crit rate, this crit damage one is also going to be pretty efficient, this Celestial Differentiator. When the wearer's crit damage reaches 120% or higher or so, you get a 1 instance of very high crit rate. So this 1 crit rate could be like using your ultimate and burst. But I think mainly this set is used for the crit damage that it provides to increase damage by 16% in the late game when we have enough crit rate as well. In terms of substats, I'm mainly looking for a couple of stats, and Pela does need quite a few stats, so she scales very well into the end game when you can min-max in terms of the substats. I'll look for attack percentage, I'll look for speed, crit rate, crit damage, or effect hit rate, depending on like which one you can find. She does utilize very well all 5 of these stats as well. So as you can see here, in terms of the chest, I'm actually running an attack percentage one just to give her a little bit more damage. Crit rate will be nice, but I think in small amounts in the early game, it doesn't make so much of a difference, especially if this character doesn't have like a skill, for example Dan Heng, which allows him to slow enemies if he crits. Pela doesn't have that, so attack is quite efficient early on, especially when you have minute amounts of crit rate. So I'm running a speed, and I'll likely want to run a speed boots, as speed makes quite a bit of difference. It not only gives you indirect energy restoration, because the faster you act, the faster you move, the more you recharge as you take more actions as well. And of course, speed also indirectly buffs your attack damage in your team composition, because the more frequently you move, the more damage you dish out as well. And last two, we have the Planar Spear as well as the Link Rope. In terms of the Planar Spear, I'm using an ice damage boost for Pela, as I'm focusing her in terms more of like a damage dealer. If you don't have an ice damage boost one on the correct set, I highly recommend you run attack percentage instead for the early game, but you definitely want to move to ice damage bonus later on. I'll be doing a guide in terms of calculating which is better in terms of the exact percentage of which one is higher than which, so do stay tuned and stick around to find out as well. And do like and subscribe if you're finding value in this video so far. It will really encourage me to make more videos like this ones to help the community and you guys as well. And anyway, now let's talk about the last one, which is the Link Rope. In terms of Link Rope, I'm actually running an attack percentage one. I don't think as the energy restoration is as important for Pela, as she has already very good uptime from her Eidolons and stuff like that from her overall kit. I prefer a bit more damage in her, and attack percentage is definitely my ideal to go as well. And in terms of the other option, I think effect hit rate might be useful, especially if we are facing harder content where we are no longer able to land our debuffs very reliably as well. Now let's talk a bit about her Eidolons. I'll be also mentioning which one I like and I think is really strong as well, so you guys can take note. Her E1 in terms of victory report already makes her kit, which has very good energy restoration, even better, because when she defeats an enemy, Pela regenerates 5 energy in it. Helps a lot in terms of energy restoration, and she doesn't really need any energy restoration traces as well. E2, Adamant Charge. When you use a skill to remove a buff, she actually gets a speed up by 10%. She does remove buffs from time to time, although it's not always reliable, but having this additional effect where she moves faster in terms of her speed whenever she does something useful in terms of removing buffs, I find it really helpful as well. And in terms of E4, I think probably this is like the most strongest ability in terms of Pela, because with this E4 full analysis, when she uses a skill, she also has the ability to reduce a target's ice resistance by 12%, making her a really solid buffer for pure ice teams later on when we start to specialize into mono element teams. A strong ice resistance down for damage dealers like Herta, or maybe even Yanqing as well if we are going that line of things. And of course, E6, Feeble Pursuit. When Pela attacks a debuff target, she deals additional ice damage equal to 40% of Pela's attack to the enemy. This is why she's better more of like a damage dealing role later on in E6, because of all these Eidolons that she gets as well. And in terms of team comps, I think the first team comp that I can talk about is she really can fill a role, especially if she's more of a damage dealing role in the terms of an AoE DPS. So as you can see here, I'm actually lining up in terms of 2 supports in terms of Natasha and Esta, who don't really dish out too much damage, and a really solid damage dealer like Pela in terms of AoE. Dan Heng will then form like the single target, and you guys can form a similar team like this, and this will be like the first team in terms of how I'm running Pela in. And of course, if you're planning to run her more as like a supportive role as well, in terms of not building her too much for damage, you could run her in a team composition where she takes on like a S-Star or Tingyun kind of role, together with a sustained character like Natasha, Fire MC, Gepard, Bailu, and stuff like that. In that case, you will probably want to run another damage dealer in terms of single target as well as AoE damage to make up a lot from your team's damage position. She does offer pretty decent amounts of ice break damage on the side as well. And I think the last team comp that she's really strong in will be like a mono ice team comp. Mono teams generally will be better later on when we have a lot more resources to build a lot of characters as well. And Pela is going to be really strong here because of her ice resistance reduction that she provides when she hits a target with a skill. This allows her to work very nicely with other ice characters, for example, damage dealers like Yanqing and AoE damage like Herta. She's really taking more of a role here in terms of a supportive role, especially when you're running with a strong team like this. Gepard here, we can run with just one defensive unit because his shield is just very strong as well.
Commencing support. Time to twirl! Enemy data secure. Net markers activate. Time for a good old counterattack.
Closing thoughts. I think that Pela is an extremely underrated 4-star character right now, currently as of time of recording. Other characters that are supportive in nature like S-Star as well as Tingyun are getting a lot more limelight because of the buffs that they provide. But I think not to be slept on, Pela does a lot of the field as well, with defense breaking of the entire enemy, having tremendous amounts of uptime and does a lot of damage. In my opinion, out of all 4-star characters currently as of official launch, I think I'm surprised most with Pela, and definitely I should have bumped her up a couple of tiers in my tier list as well. Very strong. I've already rated her pretty highly before going in, but I think now she's probably one of my favorite AoE DPS characters, especially with Eidolons. And if you guys like such content, do like and subscribe for more of such future content as well. Do check out these other 2 videos which I think will be really helpful in your Honkai Star Rail journey ahead. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.